Hey, Raz here. Couple notes about the video. First is that my friend got a new mic setup, so we experimented with him recording the audio, so that won't be my voice that you hear. Second is that I haven't done what I consider to be a standard castle fight for a little while, so for background footage I'm mostly relying on old footage that I happen to have, or sometimes there may be an unrelated, like just ZvZ fight in the background, just to keep the backdrop interesting. Alright, let's get into it.
Hello everyone, this is part 1 of 2 of a video tutorial for castle fights in Albion Online. In part 1, I'll be going over the basics like the layout, structure mechanics, and what you should be doing during a castle fight. I'm going to be focusing on things that are relevant to actually fighting the castle, not points, loot, or politics. If you're an experienced player who has fought numerous castles, then you should just skip to the second part. Alright, first thing we need to talk about is the layout of the castle. Quick shout out to ZvZ for making this wonderful map. The first thing is that all the big castles have the same layout. All of the doors face south, meaning that you will always attack to the north and defend against the south. This is important because of the screen angle in Albion Online, where it's easier to see north than it is south. In return, the defenders have a height advantage, which for the most part compensates for the bad angle. There are 3 levels to the castle. The first floor, or outer wall area, the chest room, and the lord room, along with this little squiggle area that connects the sides of the first floor. On each of these floors we have a series of gates, stairs, and towers. It's important to know the terminology for these because your shot caller should be using these to direct your Zerg's damage. If you are positioning properly, you won't actually be able to see much, and you will rely on your shot caller's directions. Blocking each of the floors are gates, represented by the orange lines shown on the map. These gates must be broken down with the demolition hammer. Keep in mind this is different than a stone gathering hammer. On the first floor, we have the east and west little or outer gates, along with the courtyard gates here in the middle. Once you break down any of these, you'll be able to push up the stairs to reach the chest room gates, and from there, the lord room. On the first floor, there are basic guards, like the ones in territories. They are invincible until one of the outer gates are broken. These guards are important because once they are all killed, they will start a spawn timer for the chest room elite guards. Once the chest room has been broken into and the elite guards are killed, a timer for the lord spawn will start. Whichever guild kills the lord claims the castle and resets all of the gates. It takes about 8 minutes to take a big castle after killing the first floor guards, so if you get past the 53 mark and the attackers still haven't killed the first floor guards, then they won't be able to secure the points for the castle. Alright, one more thing before we get any further. Go to your settings and turn off forced combat mode. If the setting's on, you won't be able to interact with any of the gates in combat, and it'll probably lead to your death. The demolition hammer is an equipable melee weapon that allows you to target the castle gates and auto-attack them. Keep in mind that you can't switch weapons in combat, so once the fight breaks out, you're locked into having the hammer equipped until you can leave combat. While using a demolition hammer, it's important to note that % damage increase modifiers will not increase your damage. However, attack speed buffs will still allow you to attack faster. After breaching the outer gates, typically your hammers will immediately move on to the next gate while your Zerg kills the guards. So this is the east outer gate, the stairs leading up, and then immediately the chest room gate. So you can see there's not a lot of room and a lot of chokes. You will have to clear both sides in order to trigger the elite guard spawning. Here you can see the squiggle overlooking the courtyard, and the west side is an exact copy of the east. Alright, the elite guards. You can see these guys are a little tougher. You'll definitely want your tanks picking these guys up and not leaving them to beat up your healers. Typically, when you have a Zerg of 50 or so, the tanks will spread out and pick up all the elite guards so that the Zerg can nuke them in the middle. The guys on the edge can make it just about to the chest before they leash. West side is the same as east, but here you get a decent look at the chest room and the stairs on both sides. Usually, by the time you're killing the lord, the fight's over, but every now and then you'll end up in a situation where you have to kill the lord under some pressure. He can fairly easily be killed with a standard 5-man party while most of the Zerg fends off the enemy. As you can see, he summons some adds and has a small stun, but nothing crazy when it comes to mechanics. Inside the castle, it's pretty close quarters, and there's a lot of choke points that can leave you vulnerable. Luckily, on each floor, there are certain small areas that are out of range of attackers. If you look at this image, you can see all the various locations. So dark green is for when you're defending the outer gates, medium green for when you're defending the chest room, and light green for when you're defending the lord room. Notice that these dots next to the gate are behind the gate. If you're defending the outer gate, you need to be behind the chest room gate to be properly safe. If you're wearing cloth or leather, these safe spots are where you need to be standing in between engages. If you aren't here, there's a high chance that you'll get picked off and die. You won't be able to see the enemy, but you're not really missing anything. You're not going to accomplish anything standing on top of the wall, staring at an enemy who's out of range. Offensive safe spots are pretty much the same idea. When you're attacking the outer gates, you want to be positioned where the castle is just outside your field of view. Keep in mind that if you're a healer or support, you might need to stay in range of your tanks to help them survive any engages. Once you break into the first floor, you can either engage from the broken gate, or you can come inside and sit up on the wall. In the chest room, just hug the bottom W. Half the time when you get to the chest room, the defense doesn't have much left, so it may not really matter, but it's better to be safe than sorry. So as far as general strategy goes, when the two groups face off to fight for a castle, there's a general flow to how the fights go. To keep things simple, we're going to assume there's one guild holding the castle and one guild attacking the castle. With more groups, you can assault the castle from multiple directions, but the general idea remains the same. The win condition for the attacking side is that they break through all the gates, kill the guards, and defeat the lord before the points for the castle are scored. Killing the enemy players is not actually required to meet this goal. Of course, most players are going to be interested in fighting, so the secondary goal is to trap the enemy within the castle to kill them and steal their loot. The defender's win condition is to either kill all the enemy's hammers, kill enough of the attacking Zerg so that they no longer wish to continue, or simply delay the enemy long enough that the defenders are able to secure the points for the castle. The fight begins with the attacking side dismounting outside the castle, equipping their hammers, and advancing onto one of the gates. If the defenders don't do anything, the attackers will hammer down the gate for free, so they must make a move. There is no need for the attackers to make the first move, because all they have to do is destroy the gates. If the attackers are positioning properly, the only targets for the defenders to attack will be the hammers. So the defenders call an engage to try and kill off the hammers. In doing so, they must leave the safe zones and expose themselves to attack. This is the attacking side's cue to call an engage. Their goal is to catch the defenders before they can get back to safety. But this then exposes the attacker's cloth line, so what the defenders can do is what is generally referred to as a fake engage. The defenders will pretend to engage onto the enemy, using a small number of spells to make it look real, and draw out the attackers. Then they can catch the attackers when they are exposed and attempt to kill them off. The attackers can of course just try to weather the storm without retaliating at all if they so choose. This process of engages, fake engages, and counter engages repeats itself until either A, one of the sides takes too many losses and attempts to flee, or B, the gate is destroyed. Once the outer gate is destroyed, the defenders will generally retreat to the chest room, where the process repeats itself in a battle for the chest room gates. If the attacker manages to breach the chest room gate, they have gained a very strong position within the castle. The chest room is actually the highest point in the castle, which means that the attackers now have both the height advantage and the screen angle advantage. Meanwhile, the defenders will be squished into one corner and will have a very limited ability to spread out and attack from different angles. As defenders, once you are pushed into the lord room, you have three options. 1. Attempt to log out. It takes 60 seconds for your character to log out in Albion. Depending on how many hammers your attackers have left, logging out might be a viable option. You lose the castle, but secure your gear. Simply log back in later and run out of the castle. 2. Attempt to make a break for it. The enemy will see you mount and be alerted, so only do this at the last possible moment. Consider using a fake engage or sacrificing your tanks to give time for the rest to escape. 3. Make a last stand. Engage over the walls as you can, and prepare for the door to break. Don't get caught stacked in the north corner when it does. Spread out in the room and brawl it out, or consider engaging out of the lord room before the door is broken. Utilize both doors to try and kill the enemy backline. Clothies should consider that it's safer for them to engage with their tanks and go into the enemy if no retreat will be called. So first up we have tanks. There's a couple different things you can be doing with a little bit of variation depending on your weapon. In general, your goal is the same as an open world ZvZ, where you're trying to catch and lock down clumps. Just this time, the clumps are going to be more naturally concentrated. Here we have the Camlin Mace running the Silence Q and Snare Charge. Obviously, you're going to be running tank armor instead of what Relhaz is using in the video, so you'll have your helm and chest ability to use during all of this. The point of the Silence Q is that you can drop beneath the hammers on the gate. This won't stop the enemy from hammering the gates, but you might disrupt them a little bit when they're trying to use their defensives. One thing you'll see Relhaz doing is going in and out of the gate pretty frequently. Sometimes to refresh his Q, sometimes for no reason really. This applies for all tanks, and the point is to keep the enemy more off guard about when you're going to engage. If you never go outside the castle gate except when you engage, the enemies are going to key in that you leaving the gate is a sign that you're going to engage, and they'll back off. You do have to watch out getting caught outside. Since we're throwing in generic tank tips, you should also keep in mind that not all of the tanks should sit around in the staircase choke. Try to spread out, even if that means you don't get to watch the enemy stand around. When it comes time to engage, you'll be leaving the gate and trying to chain CC with your fellow tanks to lock down the enemy. If you're engaging on the tanks, just trap them in. If you're counter-engaging or trying to catch clothies being ballsy, then sprint out and grab them. Keep in mind that your DPS is dropping off of the wall, so they can only reach so far. Your clump doesn't matter if it's not in range. It's super important that you don't linger outside the castle. When you're outside the castle, you're extremely vulnerable and your healers need to retreat back to the safe spots. Whenever you take damage and need healing, retreat back to the safe spots so that your healers don't need to expose themselves. If you want to make room on that staircase, as a Camlin you can also throw your E over the wall with your DPS. You can drop your Silence Q over the wall, under the corners, to possibly mess with people a little bit. You can also Snare Charge a little distance over the wall as well. Make sure you don't get caught up in the enemy engage, then use your E over the wall to trap clumps. If your spells are on cooldown, you don't really need to be on the wall. If you can't do anything, there's no point in standing in danger. Soul Scythes have a special role in castles due to their Forceful Swing W ability. This ability puts a debuff on people around them that prevents them from being able to auto-attack. This can stop hammers in their tracks, though I do believe it is cleansable. Between 2 to 3 soul scythes, you should be able to chain this ability to permanently stop the enemy hammers, assuming they don't get cleansed. Also, as a soul scythe, you can leave the gate and use your cartwheel to disrupt the hammers. It's a little thing, but every little bit helps, especially in between your forceful swings. Again, make sure you go back for heals when you need it. Soul Scythe also works pretty well over the wall, assuming that you can catch people without their night helms, like if they get Locust. The Rising Blow W has decent range on it, so between that and your E you can get a solid bit of CC off. Alright, now for Grove Keeper. I have a clip of the Grove Keeper abilities reaching over the wall, which is good to know, I guess, but you should really be down by the gate. Grove Keepers have the Resistance Shred on their Q, so you can keep that up on enemy hammers similar to the Camlin Silence Q. There's also various ways you can place your Ring of Tar to slow enemies. Other than that, just use your E as you normally would. The other things I said about not getting caught outside and going back for heals still apply. If you get pushed back to the chest and Lord Room, everything stays the same, though you may need to rotate between sides. On offense, assuming you don't have a hammer, your job is to try and catch the enemy clothies as they try to engage over the wall. You can use your chest and helm to try and help defend your hammers, or try to disrupt the enemy tanks as they try to catch your allies. If you have a hammer on, just make sure you keep your potions and defensives ready. It's very important that you don't die. That brings us to the healers. Big thing for healers is your positioning. When you're defending a castle, there are 2 safe spots and 2 groups, your tank and DPS, that will need healing. For nature, when you're covering the DPS, you will want to be in a spot where all the DPS have 3 stacks of your rejuve whenever they leave the safe zone. You can do this by stacking the mushroom queue in the path that they will be running, or just stacking them in the safe zone before an engage. Once the engage is called, you would drop your E along the path to the wall. Then look to use your cleanse if it's needed, or you could be running breeze as well. Now the big thing about stepping up to use your E is notice how Relhaz doesn't actually go up onto the wall. There's nothing up there for a healer. You can see your allies from the first floor. In the second safe spot, you are mostly going to be looking to heal the tanks. It's nice to have a nature healer over here since you can keep stacks on the tanks and mitigate the chip damage they are taking. Then when it comes time to engage, you can run up to the gate and drop your E wherever it's needed and use your cleanse to help get the tanks back to safety. Still, only run up as far as is necessary to heal. Remember that the safe spot is behind the gate, not in front of it, but you will need to step out in front in order to heal the tanks. For Holy, we have much of the same idea. You'll be sitting in a safe spot using your Q and W to top everyone off. Generally, if anyone is in the safe spot, then they are safe, and so you can prioritize them less if there is someone else that needs heals. You also have time to use Q and W rather than your E if they have made it back to the safe zone. This allows you to save your E for people that are getting caught during an enemy engage, usually right after your engage. And again, I reiterate that you should not move all the way up to the wall, only as close as you need to be to use your heals. Holies can also sit with the tanks and follow them up to the gate on engages to provide a reset on their way back. Just remember to get back to the safe spot so you don't get caught out yourself. Healers on offense are mostly the same idea. Make sure the castle is right on the edge of your screen or just outside of it so that you aren't really in range. A big thing is that at least some of your healers need to be ready to bail out your hammers. On to the DPS. First things first, melee DPS. If you're fighting a straight up castle fight, as this video assumes you are, being melee DPS is almost completely useless. On offense, you won't be able to participate until you're breaking into the Lord Room, and usually the fight is already over by then. On defense, you can technically push through the gate, but you won't really have the chaos of open world fighting to protect you. You'll be very vulnerable outside the castle walls. Of course, if your group ends up fighting outside the castle, then having melee can be handy, but for a pure castle fight, don't bring it. Alright, moving on then. In the footage, I'll be switching between the various ranged weapons, but in general, it's all the same thing. Some of the weapons have individual things that they can do, but for our basic video purposes, the general strategy is very straightforward. As a ranged DPS wearing cloth, you are very vulnerable to enemy damage, so it's critical that you stay in the safe zones in between engages. When the shot caller calls for an engage, you'll sprint up to the wall, use any buff abilities as you go, and then drop your damage over the wall in whatever direction your shot caller is called for. Once your E or EW combo is done, you should immediately run back to the safe spot as quickly and safely as you can. Anything else that comes through your head is likely not a good idea, whether that be sticking around to use your Q or staying up on the wall to watch the carnage. You run up, you drop your damage, you get the hell out. This point cannot be emphasized enough. It only takes one person hitting a beamed weeping to effectively lose the fight, or enough people getting picked off by the beamed wailing squad. Now, one addition to staying safe while engaging is a concept that is usually referred to as taking angles. This just means spreading out as you engage so that you attack from multiple angles rather than everyone clumping together and shooting from the same spot. If you think of all the damage being dropped on a single point, your DPS would ideally be spread into a sort of half circle around the target, like you see in some RTS games. Obviously, you can't form a half circle when attacking from a flat castle wall, but you can still spread out and shoot from different areas on the wall. One thing that is unique to bows is that you have a long distance resistance shred on your Q. So what you can do is sit over by the gate safe spot and keep the debuff stacked on the enemy hammers. When you're doing this, you really want to hug the side walls and avoid clumping with your tanks. When the angle is called, you can then run down and drop your E from the gate. Remember that you aren't fully safe unless you are behind the gate. Next up is Brimstone. Generally you'll be using the Burning Field and Fireball. You don't need the firewall since you're inside a castle. You can technically use the artillery thing, but you have to be careful with that, since it leaves you exposed up on the castle wall. So while you wait, you can stack up your Furious passive with Burning Field, then sprint up and drop your EW combo. Note that the game is only pseudo 3D, so even if it looks like you're dropping up on the tower, the area of effect will still apply on the ground below. For Damnation, you can also stack up the Furious passive while you wait. Since Damnation is all about that armor shred, you should try and engage slightly earlier than your DPS counterparts so that the pierce is applied before their damage hits. Siege Bow is mostly the same thing. You can use your Q and W to stack the damage passive while you wait. I've also included some clips of attacking the courtyard. The safe spot adjusts a little bit to standing behind the edge of the tower. The nice thing about the courtyard is that it gives you a lot more variety of angles to attack from. Here you can also see using the chest room safe spots. Wailing bows will reach to just about the braziers, so it's important to tuck in against that north wall pretty tight. Otherwise, it's more or less the same thing. If you're defending against both sides by yourself, you might find yourself switching between sides to engage on. Same thing with the Lord Room. On offense, it's mostly the same idea. You want to keep the castle tower right on the edge of your screen, since wailing bows go about the length of your screen. Your primary attack directions are straight up through the gate or either side of the tower. And finally, we have the supports. First up is the occult staff. Generally, with occult, you would be a part of a bomb squad of some sort, or at least a beam duo partner. If your guild hasn't really gotten there yet, you can still be useful as an occult. You can chill in the safe spot, throw some shields to people if they need, and wait for the engage to happen. When the engage is called, you drop the carpet so that everyone can get up to the wall faster. Due to the back and forth nature of castle fights, the speed up is not to be underestimated. If you happen to have two occults, you could chain them back to back, one to get up to the wall, and one to get away from the wall. As an occult staff, you'll likely also be using some sort of tank chest piece, so you can use that to support your allies once you're done beaming your DPS. One thing to keep in mind is that because the occult is so long, it can be a big giveaway for when your engage is about to happen. You might want to delay it until a second after your engage is called. Great Arcane is more of an advanced weapon. It doesn't really belong in this video, but oh well. You can very easily screw over your own engage by making the enemy team invulnerable. It's really important to only use this outside of your own Zerg's engages. Otherwise though, it has great potential for catching people and holding them there. You can freeze enemy engages, catch a bomb squad, and leave them stranded for your own counterattack. This can be used in conjunction with Brimstone, but they fixed a bug with Great Arcane so you don't really see it anymore. Generally, you would have a duo that you would beam and try to kill the group that you froze. Alright, on to Locust. Relhaz has made a separate Locust tutorial video, so if you want to get more in depth, I encourage you to go check it out. But for now, we're going to keep it basic. The first thing that you'll want to have covered is the defensive retreat of your Clothies as they come off the wall. Remember that the Clothies are only exposed during their own engage, and the enemy is likely to counterattack immediately after in order to try and catch your Clothies while they are exposed. Thus, you hang out near the safe spot, watch your DPS go up to the wall to drop, then place your Locust on the path back to safety. As a second Locust placement, you can also cover your allies as they walk up to the wall in case there's some sort of danger lingering. Between the two loci, your Clothies should be covered for their duration up on the wall. Third Locust can cover your tanks, either giving them resistances as the enemy engages, or providing cleanses as they try to retreat back to the gate after their own engage. On offense, it's much the same thing. Cover your allies while they engage, but you also definitely need a Locust to cover your hammers. It's kind of the same as a defensive tank Locust, but this is extremely important, because if your hammers die, you can no longer assault the castle. For Icicle Staff, your main role will be slowing the enemy's retreat after they engage. Stand up by the wall, and when you see the enemy engaging, drop your E and get the heck out of the way. On offense, you can also watch the gate in case the enemy tries to come out after you.